I should have known better. We all should have. But arrogance, especially the kind that festers in power, makes you blind. And the Galactic Council had arrogance in abundance. It wasn't just a flaw, it was built into the system, a cornerstone of our self-image. We believed we were untouchable, superior, wise. And yet, in that single moment when we chose to burn a human diplomat alive, we guaranteed our own collapse. My name is Ambassador Krar of the Vidian Collective. I was there. I saw it happen. And I've been carrying that moment with me ever since, not just as a witness, but as someone who let it happen. That morning, the council chamber looked like it always did, grand, pristine, a towering display of civilization's supposed progress. Crystalline walls shimmered with artificial sunlight, and the chamber buzzed with soft air currents, carefully calibrated to make the flags of 312 species ripple proudly. A symbol of unity, we told ourselves. But beneath the surface, the cracks had already begun to form. We just didn't see them. Or worse, we ignored them. Standing at the center of that chamber was Marina Blackwood, Earth's first official diplomat to the Galactic Council. She was calm, composed, and completely outnumbered. Her skin was dark, almost glowing against the stark white uniform Earth had designed for peace missions. It was supposed to be a message: diplomacy over dominance, unity over fear. We laughed at it behind closed doors, called it naive. But looking back now, it wasn't weakness, it was hope, and we snuffed it out. Marina was addressing the Council on a proposal from Earth to expand their colonial rights into the Orion Spur. It was a small request, reasonable even, backed by compliance reports and environmental studies. She spoke with poise, carefully emphasizing Earth's commitment to Council regulations. I remember her exact words. Our colonial expansion plans include extensive environmental impact studies and full transparency with local species. That should have been enough. Any rational council would have discussed, debated, maybe even denied the request, but not like this. Instead, High Chancellor Poxel cut her off, breaking protocol without hesitation. Impact studies? He sneered. His voice, a series of rippling vocal bladders, was dripping with mockery. Like the ones that led to your own planet's megafauna extinction. It was a low blow, beneath the belt, and irrelevant. Marina's jaw tensed. Just a flicker. The only sign she gave that the insult had landed, but she didn't flinch or lash out. She held her composure. Chancellor, humanity's past mistakes are precisely why we've adopted such rigorous enough. The word echoed like a thunderclap, and the room fell silent. It was Supreme Counselor Vaerth who spoke next, towering, emotionless, 6 eye stalks swiveling to focus on Marina. We've tolerated humanity because of your useful technologies. Let us end the charade. Then came the moment I will never forget, the moment that still wakes me up at night, gasping for breath. With a silent gesture, Vaerth activated the security fields. The plasma fields in the chamber weren't designed for this. They were meant for riot control, containing hostile delegates' rare, extreme cases. But these fields had been modified. Without warning, a wall of plasma sprang to life around Marina. A containment measure, we told ourselves. Temporary, but that was a lie. The first wave of plasma struck her mid-sentence. She didn't scream. That's the part that breaks me, even now. She didn't beg, didn't curse us. She looked straight at Vaerth and spoke 7 words. You have no idea what you've started. Then she was gone. Just ash. Scattered on the polished floor of the chamber that had claimed to stand for unity, the room erupted. Some delegates cheered, yes, actually cheered. Others shouted in disbelief. Many stood frozen, too stunned to even move. It wasn't just a breach of diplomacy. It wasn't just a murder. It was the moment the Galactic Council signed its own death warrant. I remember Ambassador Tawera of the Proxima Syndicate turning to me, their try-hard system pulsing erratically. They leaned in and whispered, "What have they done? What indeed?" The human delegation, 2 junior diplomats, and a cultural attaché were immediately detained. Standard procedure, the officials claimed. Necessary for security. We told ourselves we were preventing escalation, but we weren't. We were waiting. The humans didn't fight back, didn't even protest. They simply activated their emergency beacons and waited. That should have been our first clue. Not defiance, not desperation, patience. Within an hour, every human ship in Council space vanished, gone. Not through jump gates, not through standard warp signatures. They simply disappeared. No trace, no energy signatures, nothing. We were still trying to understand how, when the main display in the chamber activated, no warning, no security breach, no coded hack, just text. In every galactic language. 24 hours. That was it. No threats, no demands. Just a countdown. I excused myself, citing urgent personal business. The truth, I needed to vomit. My species doesn't normally respond to stress that way, but that day I became something new. I knew better than most what humanity was capable of. I had studied their history. I'd read about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the Holocaust, the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, but also the Marshall Plan. The civil rights movement. I'd seen how they react when backed into a corner. They unite. They evolve. They fight harder than anyone. And now, we'd killed their dream of peace. Worse, we burned it alive. And in doing so, we gave them something they hadn't had in generations, a just cause. The next 24 hours were pure agony. Every species in the council was on edge. Some tried to downplay it. Humans are emotional, not suicidal, they said. They won't retaliate. They're too invested. But the humans were already gone, not just physically. They were done playing nice. That same evening, Supreme Counselor Vareth hosted a celebratory feast. I swear to the stars, they actually toasted to putting the upstart primates in their place. That quote would be on every newsfeed in the galaxy just a day later alongside footage of the chamber's destruction. 18 hours in, our surveillance stations began to fall silent. Not destroyed, not jammed, just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch in the fabric of space-time. Impossible, our physicists said. Quantum communication can't be blocked. Those physicists vanish within days, along with all their human-related research. At the 20-hour mark, sensor anomalies began. Shadows, glitches, ships that weren't there. Wah. It didn't matter. We couldn't track them. The Arxan Empire, known for its military might, launched their full fleet, 5,000 ships. 5 million soldiers. Their pride. Their arrogance. At hour 22, that entire fleet ceased to exist. No wreckage, no survivors, no signal. And that's when panic took over. Species that had been allies for thousands of years turned on one another. Old grudges resurfaced. Colonies evacuated. Entire fleets fled council space. It was like watching a dam collapse in slow motion. And, in a way, it was. The humans had become the flood. Still, some of us clung to denial. They wouldn't really retaliate, one diplomat argued. They're still rational, but that's the thing. They weren't just retaliating. They were sending a message. Not just to us, but to every species in the galaxy. We tried peace. You chose fire. Now, learn what fire really is. Fire 23, Earth sent its only transmission. A video. Scenes from their history: war, famine, resilience, triumph. But above all, survival. Their message was clear. You tried to kill us, but we've already survived worse. Supreme Counselor Vareth, now visibly shaken, attempted to send a message of apology. Communicator connected and received a response. 2 words, too late. I watched the final minute unfold from my private quarters. The external feed showed the arrival of the human fleet. They didn't jump in, didn't warp. They simply appeared. 10,000 ships, unlike anything we'd ever seen. Sleek, lethal, powerful beyond measure. Then came a private message, not to the council, to me, Ambassador Krar. Your research into our history was thorough, but you missed one detail. Humans are both the most forgiving and the most vengeful species in known space. You've seen our patience. Now witness the alternative. It was signed, Thomas Chen, Director of Human Relations, Earth Defense Force. The final line chilled me. Please activate your personal shield. Things are about to get messy. And then it began. The chamber was still ringing with the echo of her final words. You have no idea what you've just started. Marina Blackwood was gone, turned to ash by a weapon designed for crowd control used in full view of 311 other species. The scent of burnt carbon hung in the air, but it wasn't just the smoke. It was the unmistakable stench of a mistake no one could undo. None of us fully grasped the magnitude of what had just happened. Not yet. We were used to diplomatic blunders, insults, tension, even occasional violence. But this wasn't a blunder. This was an execution. Cold, calculated, public. It didn't just cross the line, it obliterated it. And yet, clung to routine. The junior human diplomats, 2 mid-level staffers, and a cultural attaché were taken into custody for their safety, the officials claimed. But we all knew that was just a lie. We told ourselves so we could delay the inevitable. They didn't resist. No protests, no demands. They just looked at us calm, tired, maybe even a little sad, and tapped something on their wrists. That was the second clue. Emergency beacons, we assumed. Standard issue. But the way they activated them with such quiet certainty, it wasn't fear. It was resolve. Within an hour, every human ship in Council-controlled space disappeared. I don't mean they left. I mean, they vanished. No energy surge, no jump signature, no trajectory. One moment, our systems were tracking dozens of human vessels, embassies, science ships, freighters. The next, every trace of their presence was gone. Glitch, one technician muttered. Another laughed nervously. Maybe it's a synchronized stealth protocol. But deep down, we all knew better. This wasn't a glitch. The council had gathered in emergency session, trying to understand what had happened. Voices rose. Accusations flew. No one wanted to say what we were all thinking. We had just declared war on a species that never lost one. Then the chamber screen lit up. No alerts, no encryption, no demand for access. It just appeared. Across every terminal, every personal comm, every public display across the entire galactic network. 24 hours, nothing more. No signature, no threat, no demand, just a countdown. We froze. Hundreds of delegates. Hundreds of delegates. Dozens of species. None of us speaking. The silence was heavier than any gunfire. For a moment, we thought it was a bluff, some dramatic human display. But the simplicity was what made it terrifying. No theatrics, no explanations. Just a line in the sand. I left the chamber under the pretense of needing to contact my homeworld. Truthfully, I needed to sit down somewhere quiet and try to wrap my mind around what had just happened. My species, the Vidian Collective, had studied humans more closely than most. We were the record keepers of the galaxy, after all. We knew the names of their wars. We knew what Hiroshima meant. We knew what came after Pearl Harbor. They had warned us, in their own history, of what they became when peace was taken from them. That countdown. That wasn't a bluff. That was a promise. The council, of course, acted like fools. Meetings were held. Subcommittees were formed. Speeches were given. High Chancellor Poxel actually suggested the countdown might be a diplomatic tactic and emotional overreaction, nothing more. Meanwhile, panic was spreading. Security teams were deployed to human embassies, expecting violence. Instead, they found only silence. Most were already empty. Cleared out, abandoned. No signs of evacuation, no travel logs, just absence. And Earth, no response, no ambassador, no signal, just the countdown, ticking away in the background of every conversation, every document, every screen. Like a pulse. 10 hours in, the whispers started. They're not coming. They already left. They're planning something. But no one could explain how. No known propulsion system allowed for mass disappearance like that. Some believed it was a bluff, maybe cloaking tech. Others said it had to be sabotage or internal treason, or even a collective hallucination. But I knew better. I remembered what Marina had said before she died. You have no idea what you've just started. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. She knew exactly what humanity was capable of. And now, she'd bought them time to show us. At her 12, a few of the more hawkish species began to prepare preemptive strikes. The Arxan Empire deployed a fleet to patrol the Orion Spur. 5,000 warships, some of the most powerful in the known galaxy, took up positions with full combat readiness. They called it a deterrent. Others tried to distance themselves from the execution. The Proxima Syndicate issued a formal protest, stating they were unaware of Verith's plans and had not consented to the plasma field's use. They stopped short of condemnation, but it was a start. Meanwhile, surveillance stations across 3 sectors began to malfunction. Not destroyed, not jammed, just dark. Quantum entanglement communicators devices considered immune to interference simply stopped working. Like someone had unplugged reality itself. The scientists were baffled. The physics don't support this, one of them said. Then the physics are wrong, I replied, though not aloud. By our 15, internal communications started failing. Not for the humans ours. Messages took longer to send. Long-range sensors began reporting inconsistencies, shadows with no source, gravity shifts with no mass. There were no alarms, no breaches. But space itself began acting strange, and Earth still silent. At hour 17, the Proxima Syndicate called for a vote to open diplomatic channels with Earth. It failed. The Arxan delegation voted against it. So did the Draconians and the high houses of the core. We don't negotiate with threats, they said. They would regret that. At hour 18, we started losing ships. Not in combat. They just disappeared. Patrol fleet sent status updates, and then nothing. No wreckage, no signal. Entire squadrons went dark in less than a second. The Arxan command said it was sabotage. We will hold the line, they declared. At hour 22, that line vanished. All 5,000 ships gone. Not even dust remained. That was the moment the facade cracked. The council, so used to control, began to panic. Delegates yelled. Accusations flew. Armies were evacuated. Colonies were evacuated. Station Zero, the seat of council power, reported over 2,000 diplomatic vessels departing in a single hour. It was a stampede. Some of the older species called it dishonorable. Others called it wise. I sat in my quarters, watching the exodus, and I thought about the humans. I remembered studying their concept of mad, mutually assured destruction, a doctrine from their Cold War era, but humanity didn't just threaten mutual destruction. They developed the ability to erase themselves if it meant stopping a greater evil, and now they had no reason to hold back. They didn't need us, not anymore. At her 23, we received a message. Not a voice transmission, not a call, a video. It played across every device, every screen, every station. No way to turn it off, no way to stop it. It started with a montage, human history, grainy footage of wars. Cities burning, famine, disease, genocide. But it didn't end there. The video showed how they recovered, how they rebuilt. The sacrifices they made to learn from their mistakes. Civil rights marches, moon landings. Children of every race and faith learning side by side. Then it cut to Marina. Her speech, her smile, her death. The message was clear. We've already survived hell. Now we've got nothing left to lose. In our 23 and 59 minutes, Verith's Supreme Counselor of the Council, the one who had given the kill order, tried to send a message to Earth. A single sentence. We apologize. Let us talk. He got a reply. Just 2 words. Too late. That final minute stretched on like a lifetime. Every species, every station, every outpost stared at the countdown. 0 and then nothing. No explosions. No declaration of war. No visible fleet. Not at first. I was watching the external feeds from my office when I saw it. A ripple. Like a curtain being pulled back on the fabric of space. Then they arrive. 10,000 ships. They didn't come through jump gates. They didn't burst in through hyperspace. They just appeared. One moment, the sky was empty. The next, it was full of sleek, ominous ships. Not the boxy freighters or clunky cruisers we'd come to associate with human engineering. These were different. Smooth, silent, deadly. No one had seen these designs before. And then, one final message came. Not a broadcast, a private communication. Just for me, Ambassador Krar. You studied us. You warned them? For that, you will be spared. Activate your shield now. Things are about to get messy. Signed, Thomas Chen, Director of Human Relations, Earth Defense Force. I barely had time to activate my shield before the first ship fired. The weapon didn't explode. It didn't burn. It erased. A beam of nothingness. Of anti-reality. It sliced through Station Zero like a hot knife through paper, leaving behind nothing. And yet not a single civilian was harmed. Not a single anti-war delegate was targeted. It was surgical. It was personal. It was justice. The moment the countdown hit 0, everything changed. Not just for the Galactic Council, but for every species watching, waiting, praying that maybe, just maybe, the humans were bluffing. But they weren't. They never were. Station Zero, the heart of the Galactic Council, had always been a monument to power and pride. It stretched through orbit like a jewel cut, from the void gleaming crystalline walls, shimmering energy conduits, and layers upon layers of defenses considered unbreakable. It had stood for 3 millennia, untouched by war, until the humans arrived. They didn't burst through jump gates or come blazing out of hyperspace with fanfare. They simply appeared 10,000 ships, silently phasing into reality, as if they'd been waiting just outside the boundary of perception. 1 second, empty space. The next, an entire fleet. But these weren't the human ships we'd cataloged for decades. Gone were the boxy freighters and the utilitarian warships we'd dismissed as crude. These vessels were sleek, seamless, predatory. Their very presence made our sensors glitch and flicker. They radiated something we couldn't measure, power that bent the very laws we thought we understood. Then the first shot came. I had barely activated my personal shield, still shaking from the final message I'd received. Things were about to get messy when a beam of utter nothingness sliced through the sky. It wasn't a laser. It didn't explode. It didn't ignite. It simply erased. A perfect line of empty space where one of Station Zero's towers had once stood. 3,000 years of architectural pride gone in an instant. But here's the thing. It didn't touch the residential zones. The human weapons avoided them with eerie accuracy. Diplomatic staff, families, civilian workers, anyone who had spoken against the execution of Marina Blackwood were untouched. That's when we realized this wasn't vengeance. It was judgment. The humans weren't lashing out. They were executing a plan, a highly calculated surgical response tailored to punish the guilty and spare the innocent. They called it Operation Righteous Response, and it had only just begun. After the surgical strike on Station Zero, the rest of the galaxy held its breath. Surely this was a limited retaliation, a warning. Surely humanity would stop here. They didn't. Their next targets were the military installations of the Pran Defense Network, 36 fortress worlds spread across a dozen star systems, each one protected by planetary shields so advanced they could survive supernova shockwaves. The humans didn't even try to break through them. Instead, they used something they called phase shift torpedoes. The weapons didn't explode. They didn't even impact the surface. They simply phased past through the shields, like they weren't there, and then detonated deep within the military cores of those planets. Not a single civilian was harmed. Not a single hospital, school, or public structure was damaged. Every strike was perfect, intentional. Our command councils watched in horror as footage from security satellites streamed across every network, military command centers collapsing into themselves, strategic command bunkers reduced to dust. Yet residential areas remained completely intact. It was like watching a god perform surgery. That was when the fear truly began to set in, not because humanity was angry, but because they were calm, efficient, cold. We had feared a wild beast lashing out in rage. What we got instead was a predator who had studied us, who understood our weaknesses better than we did. At hour 2 of the counterattack, new reports came in. Those strange sensor anomalies we had noticed during the 24-hour countdown, they weren't glitches. They were human ships running quantum displacement drives, a technology so far beyond our understanding, it made our best stealth tech look like children's toys. Their ships didn't just hide, they existed in multiple places at once. Shadows flickered in and out of our sensors, confusing our entire detection grid. We realized, too late, that the reason we hadn't seen the humans coming wasn't because they hid behind tech, it was because they had been everywhere the whole time. The hive minds of Sector 7 learned this the hard way. They deployed their legendary psychic detection web known as the Million Mind Mesh, confident it would sniff out even the most cloaked of attackers. The humans didn't bother hiding. Their ships simply materialized inside the hive's most fortified worlds, bypassing defenses entirely. When our scientists demanded answers, we got silence. And then more disappearances. But it wasn't just the ships or the weapons. It was the psychological warfare. They didn't destroy broadcasting stations, they used them. They hijacked our networks and flooded them with carefully crafted images. Human doctors treating alien patients, human children playing alongside younglings from other species, and Marina Blackwood delivering speeches of peace moments before her execution, over and over again. It wasn't propaganda. It was a mirror, and what it showed us wasn't just humanity's rage, it showed us what we had thrown away. On Pris Prime, one of our more heavily defended worlds, our forces actually managed to shoot down a human transport. Celebrations broke out. We thought we had a victory, that we had found a chink in their armor, until the smoke cleared. What emerged from the wreckage was something we could hardly believe. Humans in power armor, though the term doesn't do it justice. These weren't exosuits or reinforced plating. These were self-contained combat ecosystems. Machines that phased through solid matter, generated energy shields capable of reflecting orbital weaponry, and moved so fast our tracking systems couldn't keep up. Our most advanced infantry units lasted less than a minute, and then we heard them speak. Radio chatter intercepted mid-battle. They were laughing, just like training, one said. Easier than the sim, another joked. They were having fun. That broke something in us. We had spent decades assuming humanity was on the same technological level as the rest of us. After all, they had shared their propulsion systems, their medicine, even some of their computing advances. But that was the catch. They only shared what they wanted us to see. They had been sandbagging the entire time, deliberately hiding their real capabilities. Studying us. Learning how we fought. Preparing for the day we might betray them, and we had walked right into it. But what shook us even more was what came next. Humanity revealed their most terrifying tool, neural override technology. Devices capable of identifying specific neural patterns and suppressing aggression without harming the host. They could selectively disable military personnel, shut down war-focused brain activity, and leave civilians untouched. They didn't have to kill us to win. They just made it impossible for us to fight. After 26 hours of continuous operations, the results were staggering. Human casualties, 0. Council military casualties, minimal. Because they weren't killing us, they were disassembling us. Strategy by strategy, soldier by soldier, ship by ship. They weren't fighting a war. They were teaching a lesson. Every action they took had a message. This is what we could have done to you. But we didn't. Not yet. And that's what terrified us more than anything, their restraint. They had weapons that bent gravity, erasing entire fleets with precision-guided gravitational ribbons. They could phase into fortresses we thought were untouchable. They could wipe our minds, disable our weapons, hack our networks without leaving a trace. And they hadn't even broken a sweat. The Galactic Council, an entity that had stood for over 3,000 years, was unraveling not because humanity was burning it down, but because they had shown us what we really were. A brittle empire held together by old treaties, corruption, and fear. Now, all that was left was truth and fire. The first thing to go wasn't a ship or a starbase. It wasn't a city, a fleet, or even a commander. It was trust, not between the Council and human. That bond had been incinerated the moment Marina Blackwood died in a wall of plasma. No, what broke next was deeper, more insidious. The trust between the species that made up the Galactic Council. The very foundation of 3,000 years of galactic cooperation cracked under the weight of something far more powerful than weapons. Truth, or more specifically, the way humans used it. They didn't need to drop planet killers or deploy swarms of drones to conquer us. All they had to do was open the door and let the rot we'd spent centuries painting over with ceremonies and propaganda spill out for everyone to see. It started slowly. After the Arxan fleet vanished, 5,000 warships gone without a trace, the panic began. But humans didn't follow up with more firepower. No orbital bombardments, no planetary invasions, just silence. And into that silence, they dropped their first payload, a video. It wasn't fancy, no music, no special effects. Just footage, grainy, time-stamped, and undeniable of Marina Blackwood's final moments from 12 different angles. The screams, the contempt, the moment the plasma fields activated. Her words, "You have no idea what you've just started." And then, as if that wasn't enough, came the next clip. Supreme General Zakharer laughing at a private dinner 3 days prior, openly mocking humanity's primitive diplomacy and joking about melting the ambassador in public. The council chamber went silent when that clip played. We were watching it live during an emergency session, our feeds hijacked by what we thought was a secure line. Dozens of species stared at one another, caught somewhere between shock and rage. Not at the humans, but at each other. Someone had leaked that footage, and we all knew who. The humans weren't just attacking us from the outside, they were already inside. In the hours that followed, humanity began what they later called the Truth Bomb campaign. Every hour on the hour, a new wave of classified documents, intercepted transmissions, and internal communications was released to every major channel across the galaxy. They came without warning, without fanfare. Just cold, hard facts meticulously curated and devastating in their precision. The first dump exposed hundreds of secret operations orchestrated by the Council's intelligence division, assassinations of political rivals, the suppression of planetary rebellions, and the strategic reclassification of dozens of sapient species as non-sentient to justify resource extraction. The second revealed financial corruption at the highest levels. Entire systems plunged into poverty, while council members funneled billions of credits into hidden accounts. The third, that one detonated like a supernova. It contained proof that 3 major species' long-standing allies had conspired to sterilize draconian colony worlds under the guise of environmental regulation, purely to prevent competitive expansion. The fallout was instant. The Draconians stormed out of the council chamber mid-session. The Nexus Concordat issued a denial, which was then immediately contradicted by video evidence of their own High Chancellor approving the plan. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a gut punch delivered with receipts. And the humans just kept going. They didn't comment. They didn't boast. They just leaked. The data spoke for itself. Council unity, once our greatest strength, unraveled thread by thread. Alliances that had stood for millennia dissolved overnight. Embassies closed. Treaties were suspended. Delegates began traveling with armed escorts or not at all. Inside the council chamber, the once orderly sessions turned into shouting matches. Accusations flew. Some species claimed innocence. Others admitted complicity in a desperate attempt to earn leniency. And all the while, the humans said nothing. They didn't need to say a word. The fourth truth bomb came with something new, a message. You claim to value justice. We're just making sure it's finally delivered. That was the moment we realized what was happening. The humans weren't just retaliating. They were replacing us, and they weren't using weapons. They were using ideas. Their next move was subtle, but brilliant. They released a document titled Proposed Post-War Governance Framework. It was written in every galactic language, structured according to every known legal system, and embedded with cultural references from species across council space. It detailed the future, a system of full autonomy for all species, real-time resource transparency, species-specific human oversight, technological education, and ethical development standards. It wasn't a threat, it was a blueprint, a way out. Then came the kicker. Humanity launched something called the Grievance Calculator. It was a system that allowed any species to submit historic injustices committed against them by the Council. The ones with the most legitimate grievances would receive priority in surrender talks, reparations, and humanitarian aid. Suddenly, every species wanted to surrender first. What started as fear of humanity became a rush for mercy. The Proxima Syndicate was the first to formally break ranks. Their statement was short. The Proxima Syndicate acknowledges humanity's right to retribution and formally surrenders. We ask only for mercy for our civilians. Within seconds, the humans replied, surrender accepted. Maintain current government. Human oversight will arrive in 48 hours. No civilian restrictions. That reply hit like a tidal wave. Mercy, not conquest. Forgiveness, not extermination. And in that moment, the real collapse began. Species that had held onto loyalty out of fear began reconsidering. In the next 2 hours, 27 species submitted formal surrender documents. The Council's emergency broadcast system was flooded with panicked messages. Supreme General Zach Herer screamed over the comms, calling them traitors. His voice cracked with desperation. And then the humans cut him off. Every screen, every feed, every encrypted military channel hijacked, and in its place, Marina Blackwood's execution. Again. Followed by the private dinner footage. Followed by everything else. The Council had lost control of its own narrative, and the humans, they had become the new historians. They called the next phase the Reckoning. It wasn't a military strike, it was an accounting, an expose, a reckoning of every dirty secret the Council had ever buried. They released internal memos, detailing how the Harmonious Collective had looted sacred artifacts from the very species they promised to protect. They released audio of High Chancellor Poxel joking about starting artificial famines to control over-enthusiastic colony populations. With every revelation, species turned on each other, not because they were being attacked, but because they'd been betrayed. And the humans offered them a path forward. Every data drop came with the same promise: surrender separately. Maintain autonomy. Begin again. Then came the videos. They weren't violent. They weren't threatening. They were human. Footage of human children playing with alien children. Human doctors treating wounded civilians from other species. Human scientists working side by side with researchers from species long marginalized by the Council. And at the center of it all, Earth. A planet that, despite everything we'd done to them, was offering help. Offering hope. It wasn't what anyone expected, and it worked. The Aryan Empire, undefeated for 10,000 years, surrendered after watching a human child share a frozen treat called ice cream with an Arxan youngling on live broadcast. Their official statement included a trade request for ice cream. The Council's desperation turned to absurdity. They begged species to hold the line, to remember history, to remember unity. But the humans knew history better than we did. They used it like a scalpel. They turned species' own memories against the Council. They weaponized nostalgia, turning every proud moment into a question mark. Was that peace? Or was it just silence bought with blood? And then came the final blow. The humans gave us a deadline, 24 hours to receive advantageous surrender terms. The result? Absolute chaos. Diplomatic vessels clogged hyperlanes. Shuttles rammed each other at orbital checkpoints, trying to file surrender paperwork. Whole species skipped the Council entirely, transmitting directly to Earth. At the final Council session, barely 30 species remained. Supreme General Zakhir tried to rally what was left. "We must stand together," he shouted. And then, from the back of the chamber, a junior aide interrupted him, a first in Council history. "Sir," the aide said calmly, "your shuttle is preparing for departure." "Should I delay it?" The chamber fell silent, and then someone laughed. Not a human. One of us. It spread, uneasy at first, then louder, then unstoppable. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because we realized how pathetic we had become, how blind, how utterly defeated we were, and that was the true genius of it. The humans didn't destroy the Galactic Council. We did. They just gave us the mirror. You'd think the most terrifying thing about humanity was their weapons, those silent, sleek warships that erased matter, the gravity lances that turned fleets into sculptures of failure, the neural disruptors that could shut down armies without a single fatality. And yes, those things were terrifying, but the most dangerous part of humanity wasn't what they used, it was what they knew, and how long they had been preparing for this moment. We had always assumed that we were the sophisticated ones. We were the elders of the stars, the masters of diplomacy and strategy, and we believed, arrogantly, that humans were young, emotional, impulsive. We allowed them into our council because of their tech, sure, but we never truly accepted them as equals. They knew that, and they didn't fight it. They leaned into it, played the role, smiled when dismissed, bowed when disrespected, and all the while, they watched, they listened, they planned. It wasn't until the final council session, the one that would go down in history as the true end of the old order, that we understood just how deep the deception went. It began with a single message. A hologram flickered into life in every surviving delegation chamber across the galaxy. At its center stood Thomas Chen, Director of Human Relations for Earth Defense Force, the same man who had warned me privately, who had sent the message telling me to activate my personal shield before the first shot was fired. Now, he was speaking to everyone. "Representatives of the Council," he began, his tone calm, almost tired. "You've been asking how we achieved such complete information dominance. Allow me to introduce some old friends." Behind him, one by one, figures stepped into view. Advisors, bodyguards, administrative staff, people who had worked alongside us for decades, and as we watched, their faces began to change. The holographic disguises shimmered, then fell away, revealing the truth beneath. Humans, every single one of them. Admiral Kex of the Praetorian Guard recoiled as his personal bodyguard of 15 years transformed into Commander James Rodriguez of Human Intelligence. His first response: "That explains why you were always so damn good at poker." There was laughter, not from the humans, from us, bitter, hollow, because in that moment, the joke wasn't on them. It was on us. They hadn't just infiltrated our systems, they had infiltrated our lives, our structures, our councils, our friendships. People we had trusted for years were agents of Earth, and not a single one had slipped up. My own aide, Venus Sharp Efficient, loyal, stepped forward. Her disguise dropped, revealing a human woman. "Sorry, Ambassador," she said quietly. "For what it's worth, you were one of the good ones." I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. I had prided myself on being one of the most observant minds in the galaxy. A historian, a chronicler, a guardian of truth, and I hadn't seen it coming. That was the brilliance of their plan. They didn't try to overpower us. They became part of us, Thomas Chen continued. We understood early on that first contact doesn't always go well, he said. In our own history, it rarely did, nations meeting nations, tribes meeting outsiders. We studied those failures. And we learned. So when we met you, he said, eyes scanning the silent chamber, we prepared for every possibility, including betrayal. They developed perfect holographic disguises tech that bypassed every biometric, every DNA scanner, every neural scan. And they'd had it since the beginning. They'd shared their propulsion systems, their medical advancements, their reactor designs, but never their real technology. The things that truly gave them an edge, they'd kept that hidden, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was why they'd done it, because they'd believed in us, and they knew we might fail them anyway. That's when Thomas dropped the second bombshell. Marina Blackwood knew, he said. She volunteered. A hush fell across the chamber. You could hear breathing. You could feel the weight of that sentence crash down like a star collapsing in on itself. Intelligence suggested the council was preparing something drastic, Chen said. Marina insisted on going, not just to negotiate but to reveal the truth. She knew she might not survive. Wanted to scream, to stand up, to deny it, but I couldn't, because it made too much sense. Everything she had done, every word, every calm response in the face of provocation. She had known, and still she went, because she believed somehow, impossibly, that we could be better, that her death would expose what lay beneath our polished speeches and diplomatic pretense, and she was right. Her execution hadn't just sparked war. It had opened our eyes. Some council members wept openly, others stared straight ahead, faces blank. A few turned off their feet entirely, unable to bear it. But the humans weren't done. Thomas Chen stepped aside, and a massive screen lit up. It displayed timeline charts, dossiers, communication logs, and encrypted files, all cataloging the full extent of their preparations. They had mapped out every council species' political landscape, built relationships with low-level staff who would one day rise to power, compiled blackmail dossiers not to use but to understand, to anticipate, to plan. And it wasn't just war they prepared for. They had developed economic models for peaceful integration. They had designed educational programs that could teach ethics across cultural boundaries. They had created rehabilitation pathways for corrupt officials. They had even drafted frameworks for transferring power from failed regimes without triggering civil wars. And while we patted ourselves on the back for letting them join our club, they were quietly building a backup civilization. Not out of spite, out of necessity, because they didn't trust us to keep our word, and we proved them right. Thomas Chen looked directly into the camera. You chose war, he said, voice steady. So we gave you war. But had you chosen peace, true peace, we were ready for that too. My species, the Vidian Collective, found itself at a crossroads. We were the keepers of the Council's records, the official archivists of galactic history. And now we knew half of what we preserved was sanitized, edited, rewritten to protect the image of unity we so desperately clung to. And the humans had caught us in the act. Ambassador Krar, said Sarah Martinez, my former aide, now fully revealed as a human intelligence officer, your people have a choice. The Vidian archives contain 3,000 years of council records, some of them true, most of them not. Will you help us set the record straight? It wasn't a threat. There was no force behind her voice, only sadness and hope. The choice was obvious, but before I could answer, the final attempt at council solidarity collapsed. Admiral Kex of the Praetorian Guard, still reeling from the betrayal of his bodyguard, activated the dead man's switch. A final failsafe meant to purge the Vidian archives in case of invasion. It didn't work. Changed the codes 3 years ago, said Commander Rodriguez casually. Right after that poker game where you lost 3 months' salary. The final spark of resistance flickered and died. The last attempt to hide the truth was stopped by a joke. Afterward, the Praetorian Guard transmitted everything records of secret missions, political assassinations, suppressed uprisings, the full, unfiltered history of the Council, the truth. Then someone asked the question we were all thinking. If you had this much information, if you knew how broken we were, why wait? Why let us believe we were in control? Thomas Chen answered without hesitation. Because humanity believes in second chances. He paused. Marina Blackwood believed the Council could change. She died still believing that. And her death proved why that belief, though noble, was wrong. He let that hang for a long time. Then he said the words that made history crack. "We didn't just prepare for war, we prepared for peace. You chose war." My species voted that same evening. The Vidian archives would be turned over to human oversight. The truth would be published for all species to see, unfiltered, unedited, undeniable. And in doing so, we'd finally begin again. Peace came on a Tuesday, not with cheers or celebrations, not with parades or solemn declarations, but with the soft hum of a shuttle touching down on the ruins of what used to be the Galactic Council chamber, now renamed the Galactic Assembly. And standing at the head of that delegation was Alexandra Blackwood, daughter of Marina Blackwood, the diplomat we murdered in cold blood. She wore the same white uniform her mother had died in, not as an act of provocation, but as a symbol. A signal, a reminder. The chamber was quiet, almost reverent. Delegates, those who remained, stood not as rulers but as survivors. Representatives of a galaxy humbled, hushed, changed. Alexandra stepped to the podium, cleared her throat, and began. "Humanity's terms are simple," she said, her voice calm and level with a steadiness that reminded many of her mother. "But they are non-negotiable." The screens behind her lit up, and 7 points appeared, each one more world-shaking than the last. These weren't demands. They weren't ultimatums. They were the blueprints for a new galaxy, one rebuilt not from pride or fear, but from truth. Term 1. The truth: every species was required to publicly acknowledge its role in past injustices. Not vague gestures, not carefully worded apologies, real accountability. The Vidian archives, once the most sanitized, curated historical vaults in the known galaxy, would be transformed into the Galactic Historical Truth Commission, overseen by a multi-species board that included not just council races but 47 other species long ignored or suppressed. The message was clear: no more erasing the past. We couldn't build anything honest without facing who we had really been. Term 2. Reconstruction: humanity would now share its true technological advancements, not the watered-down versions but the real ones. Quantum displacement drives, neural sync integration, phase shift weaponry, medical nanotech capable of reversing degenerative conditions. But they would do it slowly, carefully. Each species would be assessed for readiness, not just technological, but ethical. No more handing fire to children. Instead, the galaxy would rise at a sustainable pace together. Term 3. Representation: the new Galactic Assembly would include every sapient species, regardless of historical classification or perceived development level. Those 47 forgotten species? The ones the Council had ignored, oppressed, or deemed unready. They would now have equal votes, equal voices, equal value. Humanity had scoured the galaxy during the war, lifting them from the shadows we'd pushed them into. They weren't pawns to be used, they were neighbors to be welcomed. Term 4. Responsibility: those who had directly ordered or enacted crimes against sapient beings would face justice, but not human justice. Instead, humanity worked with scholars and legal experts from every species to design a new interstellar justice tribunal, a court that blended legal traditions, moral systems, and cultural contexts to ensure fairness across lines we once thought impassable. Justice wouldn't be blind, it would be wise. Term 5. Reformation: each species would retain autonomy, but with new minimum standards for sapient rights, environmental stewardship, and technological responsibility. Humanity wouldn't punish those who fell short. Instead, they would help them rise, through education, through guidance, through partnership. No more posturing, no more threats. Just accountability, shared and supported. Term 6. Redemption: any individual, regardless of species or past action, could apply for rehabilitation. They built massive institutions called New Start Academies, centers, where former officials, soldiers, and even war criminals could learn, reflect, and rebuild themselves. Not everyone was accepted, but those who were given a second chance earned it. The humans didn't erase the past. They offered a chance to outgrow it. Term 7. Our children: this was the one that shook us most. We require, Alexandra said, that every species send their children to study alongside human children, not as subjects, not as subordinates, but as equals. Because humanity understood something the Council had long forgotten. The future doesn't belong to adults in chambers or soldiers in orbit. It belongs to children. We wanted to avoid repeating our sins. Our children would have to learn not what we had done, but what we should have done. The chamber murmured after she finished. There were questions, concerns, doubts, and then one of the few remaining hardliners, asked what many were wondering. "What about justice for your mother?" Alexandra paused. Her expression shifted, hardening. "My mother died believing in peace," she said. "We honor her not with revenge, but by building the peace she imagined." She turned to the delegate. "But rest assured," she added, her eyes piercing and cool, "we will never forget. And we will never be vulnerable again." And that was that. What followed was the most rapid, radical transformation in galactic history. Humanity established sister worlds, pairing each human colony with an alien world to foster mutual growth, culture sharing, and trade. Multi-species research teams formed, combining alien biology with human engineering. The breakthroughs came faster than anyone predicted. And then came the Cultural Fusion Festival's annual events held across hundreds of worlds. Music, cuisine, games, children laughing, entire civilizations learning to play again. Remember the ice cream that swayed the Aryan Empire? There are now 312 official flavors, one for each former council species. My personal favorite: Arxan Bloodberry Swirl. Sweet, tart, unforgettable. Even the educational system changed. Human children learned alien languages. Alien children studied human history. They debated. They challenged one another. They learned from our mistakes, not just the triumphs. The failures, too. We almost destroyed ourselves. A human teacher once said to a mixed-species classroom, "We don't want you to learn that lesson the hard way." As for me, I, Ambassador Krar, was appointed the first director of the Galactic Historical Truth Commission. My job isn't to rewrite history, it's to uncover it, to tell it, to keep it honest. Sarah Martinez, my former aide, now openly human, still works with me. Her daughter and my youngling play together in my office sometimes. Last week, they made a handprint mural using something called finger paint. It's messy, but beautiful. It hangs on my wall now, above a quote from Marina Blackwood. "Peace is not the absence of struggle. It's the presence of truth and the will to grow past it." A lesson for us all sometimes. When I walk through the rebuilt assembly, I hear laughter echoing down its halls, alien and human, mixed and inseparable. And I wonder, how did it come to this? The answer is as simple as it is painful. We tried to dominate a species that only ever asked for a seat at the table. We looked at their outstretched hand and burned it. We mistook kindness for weakness. And in return, humanity didn't just fight back. They taught us. They held up a mirror and made us see who we really were. And then, impossibly, they forgave us. That's the part I still don't fully understand. They had every reason to destroy us, every right to rule us, every tool to reshape the galaxy in their image. But instead, they invited us to help build something better, not for them, for everyone.